The wind screamed across the empty wasteland, carrying dust, cold, and echoes of the world that once was. Inside a small metal shelter, Evan, a human survivor, sat near a weak heater, his eyes fixed on the trembling flame. Outside, the storm raged like an angry beast, shaking the walls. Evan had lived here alone for months, repairing broken machines, collecting scraps, and trying not to remember the faces he had lost. He thought he was the last soul left on this dead colony, until he heard something, a soft sound behind the supply crates. It wasn't metal or wind, it was softer, like breathing. He stood slowly, knife in hand, every muscle tense. "Who's there?" he whispered, his voice almost lost in the wind's roar. No answer, only silence. He moved closer, step by step. Then, something shifted, small, quick, and frightened. He turned the flashlight toward the corner, and his heart skipped a beat. A pair of silver eyes looked back at him, glowing faintly in the dark. It was a girl, or at least she looked like one. Her skin shimmered with a pale violet hue, her hair like strands of light. She wore torn clothes, her hands trembling as she pressed herself into the corner. Evan froze. He had never seen an alien this close before. He had heard rumors that some alien refugees were still hiding after the evacuation, but no one had ever found one alive. She looked half-starved, too weak to stand, her lips dry and blue from cold. She whispered something in a soft, musical voice, words he couldn't understand. Then she coughed, almost collapsing. Evan's instincts told him to be careful, but his heart told him something else. He dropped the knife and reached for his emergency blanket. "Hey, it's okay," he said quietly, his tone gentle. "I'm not going to hurt you." She flinched at his voice, then slowly peeked up again, her eyes wide. When he offered the blanket, she didn't move. Only after a long pause did she reach out with shaking hands and take it, wrapping it tightly around herself. Evan sat down on the opposite side of the room, trying to make sense of what just happened. He couldn't stop staring at her. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes darting around like a trapped bird. There was something fragile about her, something that made him feel strangely protective. Hours passed. The storm outside grew louder, the heater hummed softly. Every time Evan looked up, he found her still awake, watching him carefully. At one point, she pointed toward his canteen, her lips barely moving. He handed it to her. She drank quickly, then hugged it close, like it was the first warm thing she had touched in days. He smiled faintly. "Guess we're both just trying to survive, huh?" She tilted her head, not understanding his words, but sensing his kindness. In that moment, the fear in her eyes softened just a little. Evan leaned back against the wall, exhaustion slowly taking over. He didn't know if letting her stay was a mistake, but somehow, the shelter didn't feel so empty anymore. He closed his eyes, the sound of the storm outside fading into a distant hum. When he woke up hours later, something felt different. The heater's glow was dim, and the wind had quieted. But what made him freeze wasn't the silence. It was the warmth beside him. He turned his head slowly. The alien girl was there, curled up next to him. Her head rested lightly against his arm, her breathing calm and steady. The blanket had slipped halfway off her shoulders, and her hand clutched a corner of his jacket as if afraid he would leave. Evan didn't move. He just stared, feeling something unfamiliar stir in his chest, a strange mix of confusion and tenderness. He had saved her, yes, but he didn't know why she trusted him, or why her presence made the shelter feel alive again. Outside, the storm began to fade. Inside, two lonely souls slept side by side, one human, one alien, bound by a fragile, silent thread neither could explain. And in that quiet night, the story of Evan and the alien girl had just begun. When Evan woke again, pale sunlight leaked through the cracked panels of his shelter. The storm had passed, leaving only silence and dust. For a few seconds, he didn't remember what had happened. Then he felt the soft weight against his arm, and everything came rushing back. The alien girl was still there, asleep beside him. Her breathing slow, her skin glowing faintly in the morning light. She looked peaceful, too peaceful for someone who had spent the night hiding from death. He didn't dare move, afraid to break that fragile calm. After a moment, he gently pulled his arm away and stood up. She stirred but didn't wake, her fingers tightening around the blanket. Evan rubbed his face, trying to think. He hadn't spoken to another living being in months, and now there was an alien girl sleeping in his shelter like she belonged there. He made a small breakfast, dried rations, and boiled water. The smell must have reached her, because when he turned, she was sitting up, blinking sleepily. Her hair shimmered softly, catching the light like strands of silver thread. She looked so young, maybe 16 or 17 in human years. Evan smiled awkwardly and pushed a ration pack toward her. "Eat," he said. She tilted her head, not understanding. So he mimed eating, and her eyes lit up with recognition. She nodded quickly, taking the food and biting carefully. He watched her for a while, fascinated by how delicate she looked. There were faint lines of glowing symbols along her neck, maybe scars or something deeper. She noticed his stare and pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Evan looked away, embarrassed. "Sorry," he muttered. "Just trying to figure out who you are." For the first time, she spoke a single clear word. "Lyra." Evan blinked. "Your name?" She nodded, smiling faintly. "Lyra." He pointed to himself. "Evan." She repeated it softly. "Evan." It sounded strange coming from her, melodic, almost gentle. For the first time in months, Evan laughed. Something about hearing his name again made him feel human. The day passed quietly. Evan worked outside, fixing a damaged solar panel while Lyra stayed near the door, watching him cautiously. Every time he looked back, her eyes followed him, curious. He wondered what she was thinking, what kind of world she came from. The mark on her neck glowed brighter whenever the wind picked up, a soft pulse like a heartbeat. He couldn't help but wonder if it was more than just a mark. That night, they shared the heater again, sitting on opposite sides. Lyra seemed calmer now, no longer afraid of him. When he handed her a cup of warm water, she said his name again, this time with a little smile. "Evan." He nodded. "That's me." She touched her chest. "Lyra." He smiled back. "Yeah, I remember." Then, something outside made them both freeze. A distant hum, mechanical, rhythmic, not wind. Evan turned off the heater and listened. The sound grew louder, a low vibration in the ground. Lyra's glow brightened suddenly, her eyes wide with fear. She whispered something fast, her voice trembling. Evan couldn't understand, but he didn't need to. Whatever that sound was, she was terrified of it. He grabbed his scanner and peeked through the crack in the metal door. Through the dust, he saw faint red lights sweeping across the horizon. Drones. Military type, not his colony's design. They were searching for something. Lyra crawled closer, clutching his sleeve, shaking her head. "No, no, please," she whispered. Evan's heart pounded. He didn't know what those drones wanted, but he knew they were bad news. "Stay quiet," he whispered back. "Don't move." The hum passed slowly, fading into the distance. For several minutes, they didn't breathe. When the sound was finally gone, Lyra collapsed against him, trembling. He held her without thinking. "It's okay," he murmured. "They're gone." But in his mind, questions were already forming. Who were they looking for? Why did Lyra glow when the drones came near? And what did that mark on her neck really mean? As she drifted into uneasy sleep, Evan stared at the cracked ceiling. He had promised himself not to get involved in anything beyond survival. But now, with an alien girl sleeping in his arms and unknown machines searching the skies, he realized it was too late to go back. The storm had brought her to his door, and something told him another, much greater storm was coming. One that would tear open the secrets of both their worlds. Evan didn't sleep much that night. Even after the drones disappeared beyond the horizon, their echoes seemed to stay in the air. Lyra slept beside him, curled like a frightened child, her glowing skin dimming slowly until it faded into silence. He sat near the heater, eyes fixed on the mark on her neck, watching it pulse faintly like a living thing. By morning, his mind was full of questions. He needed answers, and maybe she did too. When Lyra woke, she looked calmer, but her eyes still carried fear. Evan pointed to the mark gently. "Lyra, this," he said. "What is it?" She touched it carefully, then looked away. "Not safe," she whispered. "Bad people follow mark." Evan frowned, trying to understand. "You mean they track you?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. That single motion sent a chill down his spine. The drones last night hadn't just been searching randomly. They were hunting her. He stood up and began checking his equipment. If they were tracking her signal, they had to move. But moving outside meant exposure, storms, raiders, and scanners. He looked at her small frame, weak but determined, and sighed. You picked the wrong human to hide with, kid, he muttered. She tilted her head, not understanding, but smiled anyway, as if she knew he was trying to help. The next hours were a blur of preparation. Evan packed supplies, fixed his old terrain bike, and pulled out a jammer module from an old recon drone. If he could modify it, maybe it would block whatever signal her mark was giving off. Lyra sat beside him, watching with silent curiosity. Sometimes she tried to help, handing him tools. Other times she just stared at the sky through the broken roof, as if missing a place far beyond the stars. At one point, he caught her humming softly. It was a melody unlike anything he had heard, strange, beautiful, and sad. The kind of sound that made the air itself feel alive. When she noticed him listening, she stopped, blushing slightly. Evan smiled. Don't stop, it's nice. She shook her head. Home song, she said quietly. Only, families sing. He nodded slowly, realizing that somewhere far away, she had lost everything too. By evening, the jammer was ready. He motioned for her to sit close, then attached a small device near her neck. She flinched when it buzzed softly, her glow flickering once before settling to a dull shimmer. He checked the scanner. The signal had vanished. Good, he said with relief. They can't track you now. She looked up, confused but trusting, and whispered, safe. He smiled faintly, for now. But safety never lasted long on this planet. Just as they were about to rest, the ground trembled. A distant explosion echoed through the hills, followed by a rising column of smoke. Evan ran to the lookout window. A ship was burning in the distance. It wasn't human design, its hull glowing with alien script that matched the symbols on Lyra's neck. She stood behind him, eyes wide, whispering something like a prayer. That ship, Evan said. It's one of yours, isn't it? Lyra's hands trembled as she nodded. Tears glimmered in her eyes. Family, maybe. Without another word, she rushed to the door. Evan caught her wrist. Wait. It's too dangerous. But she shook her head fiercely. They need help. He could have stopped her. He could have locked the door and pretended not to care. But he couldn't. He saw the fear and hope battling in her eyes. The same look he once had when searching for survivors of his own kind. He grabbed his gear and nodded. All right, but we go together. The two of them rode out into the fading light. The wind howled again, carrying dust and fire. Evan's bike groaned over the rough terrain as they followed the smoke trail. As they neared the crash site, the sky darkened. He saw the ship broken into pieces, scattered across the desert like fallen stars. No signs of life, only silence. Lyra walked ahead, her steps slow, tears tracing down her glowing cheeks. She knelt beside a cracked piece of hull and placed her hand on it, whispering in her language. Evan stood behind her, heart heavy. He had no idea what she was saying, but the grief in her voice needed no translation. When she stood again, something inside her had changed. Her eyes no longer looked afraid. They looked determined. She turned to him and said softly, "No more hide. We find truth." Evan met her gaze, understanding that this wasn't just survival anymore. It was the beginning of something much bigger. The universe had taken everything from both of them. Now, together, they would take something back. Smoke curled into the blood-red sky as Evan and Lyra stood before the ruins of the alien ship. The air smelled of burned metal and ozone. Flames flickered weakly among the wreckage, dying slowly with the daylight. Lyra's eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the fire as she walked through the broken debris, calling out softly in her native tongue. No one answered. The silence was heavy. Each step she took crunched on glassy sand and twisted metal. Evan followed close behind, scanning for heat signatures or life forms. Nothing. Only ash and shattered dreams. He found her kneeling beside a torn fragment of the ship's hull. Her fingers traced alien symbols glowing weakly across the metal. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she whispered, "Mother's crest." Evan crouched beside her, confused. "Your family's?" She nodded, voice breaking. "My home ship, gone." He didn't know what to say. He had lost people before, but not like this, not across stars. He gently rested a hand on her shoulder. "We'll find out who did this," he said quietly. She looked up at him, eyes glistening, and for a moment, the walls of language and species didn't matter. Grief was universal. Suddenly, his scanner beeped. A small energy pulse was coming from deeper inside the wreck, faint but steady. Evan pointed. Something still active. Lyra followed, clutching her blanket tighter around her shoulders. They climbed through a collapsed corridor until they found the source, a small data core, cracked but glowing. Evan knelt beside it, brushing off the dust. This might hold the ship's records, he said. Maybe even show what happened. Lyra nodded eagerly, her hands trembling as she touched the device. When her skin met the metal, it reacted instantly. The light flared, and alien script filled the air like floating holograms. The core recognized her. Images flickered before them, scenes of her ship fleeing through space, pursued by dark vessels with jagged wings. Explosions lit the void, alarms screamed. And then, a final recording appeared. An alien woman with the same silver eyes as Lyra. Her face was calm, but full of sorrow. "Lyra," she said, her voice trembling. "If you see this, run, my child. They know what you carry. The key is within you. Never let them find it." Then the image broke into static. Lyra's breath caught. Her knees gave out. Evan caught her before she fell. "Hey, it's okay, you're safe," he said. She shook her head. "No safe. They come for me. For what inside?" He frowned. "Inside you." She pressed a hand to her chest, where the faint light of her mark pulsed again. "My mother hide power, memory of world, inside me." Evan's mind raced. If what she said was true, she wasn't just some refugee. She was carrying something valuable, maybe dangerous. "Those drones," he said slowly. "They were tracking that signal, not just your mark." Lyra nodded. "They want key, destroy my world, take yours." He looked toward the dark horizon, where faint red dots were beginning to appear again in the distance. "They're coming back," he muttered. Lyra's glow brightened as fear filled her again. Evan grabbed her hand. "We can't stay here." They ran, jumping over wreckage, the ground shaking as the first drone engines echoed through the valley. They reached the bike just as a bright beam sliced through the wreck behind them. Metal exploded, fire lit the dunes. Evan started the engine, and the bike roared to life. "Hold on," he shouted. Lyra clung to him as they sped across the wasteland, chased by red light and dust. The drones fired again, explosions tearing through the sand behind them. Evan weaved between rocks and ridges, the bike barely holding together. Lyra raised her hand suddenly, her mark glowing bright like a beacon. A wave of energy burst from her palm, scattering dust and static. The drones faltered, systems flickering. Evan looked back, shocked. "You can do that?" She shook her head, breathless. "Don't know, just happen." When they finally stopped miles away, the night had fallen. They hid beneath an overhang, the bike smoking. Evan's heart still raced. He looked at her, pale, exhausted, trembling. She had power she didn't understand, enemies she couldn't name. And now, he was caught in the middle. But as he watched her eyes dim with fatigue, he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't abandon her. Not now, not ever. He placed his jacket over her shoulders and whispered, "Rest, Lyra, I'll keep watch." Far above them, red stars moved silently across the black sky. Not stars, but hunters. And somewhere deep in her chest, the secret her mother hid began to stir. The night stretched long and heavy. Wind whispered through the broken rocks as Evan sat awake, watching the horizon. The red lights in the distance had vanished, but he knew they would return. Beside him, Lyra slept quietly, her faint glow pulsing like a heartbeat beneath his jacket. He couldn't stop thinking about the message. Her mother's voice, the word key, and the strange energy that had burst from Lyra's hand. It was more than just alien technology. It was something alive, something inside her. And if others were hunting her for it, it had to be powerful. When morning came, he gently woke her. She blinked sleepily, eyes soft with exhaustion. "Time to move," he said, handing her a ration bar. She nodded, still weak, but she didn't complain. Even now, after everything, she trusted him, and that trust felt heavier than any weapon he carried. They traveled for hours through the gray wasteland. Mountains rose in the distance, hiding the ruins of an old human research facility. Evan remembered this place, once a hub for deep space projects before the colony collapse. If there was anywhere he could hide her or find answers, it would be there. By the time they reached the base, the sun was low. The gates were half buried in sand. but the power systems still hummed faintly beneath the dust. Evan forced open a hatch, the stale air inside smelling of rust and memories. "Stay close," he said, his voice echoing in the silence. Lyra followed him like a shadow, her eyes wide as she looked at the strange human machines. Inside, the walls were lined with old consoles and broken monitors. He brushed off one and activated the backup generator. The lights flickered weakly to life. "Still breathing," he muttered, surprised. Lyra smiled faintly, pointing at a screen showing ancient Earth code she couldn't read. "This your world?" He nodded. "Yeah, what's left of it." He connected the damaged alien core to the human terminal. Maybe the system could translate something. At first, nothing happened. Then the screen flashed, showing strange data patterns merging with human code. Lyra's mark glowed again, reacting to the link. Evan backed up. "Lyra, it's connecting to you." Before he could pull the plug, the console emitted a deep hum, and a hologram flickered to life. It was her mother again, clearer this time, her image flickering but alive. "Lyra," she said, "if this message reaches you, the key within you must awaken. It holds the memory of our civilization, our oceans, our skies, our history." The woman's eyes turned sorrowful. "But beware, the ones who hunt you seek to rewrite worlds. They call themselves the extractors. They destroy what they cannot own." Her voice trembled. "Trust no one, except those who choose to protect, even without reason, like humans once did." Then the image faded into static. Lyra covered her mouth, tears falling silently. Evan stood frozen, trying to absorb her words. "Memory of a world," he said slowly. "It's not a weapon. It's everything they were." She nodded, voice small. "Mothers say my body holds seed, their world reborn." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Evan realized what it meant. If she died, her entire species' legacy would vanish. And now, those machines in the sky wanted to take that memory for themselves. He turned toward her, voice steady. "Then we protect it." Lyra looked up, surprised. "You help me?" He smiled faintly. "I didn't survive this long just to let another world die." Suddenly, the base lights flickered red. A motion alarm blared, proximity alert. Evan rushed to the monitor, seeing multiple heat signatures closing in fast. "Drones, maybe a dozen, maybe more." "They found us," he whispered. Lyra's glow brightened in fear. "No hide now," she said softly. "They follow light. Follow me." Evan grabbed his rifle, checking the power cell. "Then we give them something to follow," he said, forcing a grin. She stared at him, confused. "You fight them?" He nodded. "We fight them." He handed her a small EMP grenade, showing how to press the trigger. She hesitated, then nodded firmly, determination shining through the fear. The noise outside grew louder. Engines, metal wings cutting through the air. The first drone beam slashed across the outer wall, sparks raining down. Evan ducked behind a console, firing back. Lyra crouched beside him, hands shaking, but her eyes glowing brighter. A second beam hit. The floor shook. She raised her hand again, light bursting from her palm like a flare of lightning. The drones recoiled midair, systems crashing one by one. Evan turned to her, eyes wide. "Lyra, that." But she collapsed before he could finish, the glow fading from her skin. He caught her in his arms, heart pounding. Her breathing was faint. Outside, the surviving drones regrouped, red lights circling the ruins like hungry predators. Evan held her close and whispered, "Hang on, Lyra. I'm not letting them take you." The light of the base flickered weakly. The war for her secret had just begun. Dust rained from the ceiling as explosions shook the abandoned base. Evan clutched Lyra close, feeling her heartbeat slowing under his hands. Her glow had dimmed almost completely, her breathing shallow. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Don't you dare stop now." Outside, the metallic whine of drones grew louder. Their searchlights sliced through the night like red blades. The old walls wouldn't hold for long. He laid her gently on the floor and ran to the console, fingers flying over the cracked controls. If he could overload the defense grid, maybe he could buy them time. A burst of static answered him. The power reserves were almost gone. He slammed his fist on the panel in frustration. Then, a soft sound made him turn. Lyra was stirring, her silver eyes half open, glowing faintly again. "Evan, she whispered weakly. They come. I know, he said. I'm not letting them take you. Another explosion hit, this one closer. The blast door bent inward, sparks flying. Evan grabbed his rifle and aimed at the entry. He didn't care how many came. He had one job now, to keep her safe. He fired as the first drone broke through, its red light burning like an eye of fire. The beam missed him by inches, scorching the wall. He dove for cover and shot back, hitting its sensor core. The machine screeched and fell, crashing into the floor in a shower of metal. But there were more. Dozens swarming through the smoke. Lyra crawled behind the console, trembling, whispering words in her own tongue. Evan reloaded, breathing hard. Lyra, can you do that light thing again? She shook her head. No strength, too empty. He looked around desperately and saw a hatch on the far wall, an old maintenance tunnel. It was their only chance. He pulled her up gently. We're moving, come on. She leaned on him, barely able to walk. Together they stumbled toward the hatch as bullets of plasma tore through the air. They dropped into the dark tunnel just as another explosion ripped through the lab. The heat washed over them, the shockwave throwing them forward. Evan shielded her with his body, rolling as debris clattered around them. When the noise faded, all that was left was silence and the smell of smoke. He helped her sit up, coughing. You okay? He asked. She nodded weakly. You hurt? He smiled faintly. I've been worse. The tunnel stretched deep underground, lit only by the faint glow of her skin. They walked slowly, the air thick and stale. Lyra held his hand now. Maybe for balance, maybe for comfort. He didn't pull away. They had crossed too many fires together to be strangers anymore. After what felt like hours, they reached a large underground chamber. Old human tech lay scattered across the floor. Crates, cables, and a dormant transport pod. Evan brushed off the dust and checked the power level. A single blinking light responded. He smiled. Looks like this old thing still works. Lyra watched him with tired eyes. Where go? He looked at her. Anywhere but here. But before they could board, the tunnel behind them glowed red. The drones had followed the heat trail. Lyra gasped, clutching her chest. Her mark flared suddenly, brighter than before. The air vibrated. Static crackled along the walls. Evan backed away as a wave of light burst from her like a heartbeat. The ground trembled, the machines froze mid-air. One by one, the drones fell, their lights dying instantly. When it was over, the chamber was silent again. Lyra stood trembling, her eyes glowing like stars. Evan stared at her, half in awe, half in fear. What was that? She pressed a hand to her chest, voice soft. He waking, mother's memory, inside me now. He approached slowly, placing a hand on her shoulder. You're burning up. She smiled faintly. I feel everything, my world, my people, they live in me. He didn't understand it fully, but he saw the pain in her face. Power was eating at her strength. Then we need to get you somewhere safe, he said. Somewhere they can't find you. She looked up, her eyes meeting his. No safe place. Evan, not now, she said softly. They won't stop. He gritted his teeth. Then we'll make them stop. He lifted her into the pod, strapping her in carefully. The machine hummed as power returned. He climbed in beside her and set the coordinates for the northern canyons, the one place scanners never reached. As the pod lifted off, the ruins below glowed faintly from the destruction they had left behind. Lyra leaned against him, whispering something in her native tongue. He didn't know the words, but he knew the meaning. Thank you. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Don't thank me yet, he murmured. We're just getting started. Above them, the night sky opened wide, endless and full of stars. But not all those lights were stars. Some were moving, watching, waiting. The transport pod tore through the clouds, leaving a burning trail behind it. Evan held the controls tightly as turbulence shook the small cabin. Lyra sat beside him, pale and quiet, her glow flickering like a dying flame. She was getting weaker with every mile, and he could feel it. Stay with me, he said softly, glancing at her. She smiled faintly. You always say that. Because you always need reminding, he replied, trying to hide the fear in his voice. Below them stretched the vast northern canyon, endless, deep, and filled with mist. It was the one place where signals vanished completely. If they reached it, they could disappear, at least for a while. But as the pod descended, A red light flashed on the console. Evan cursed under his breath. They found us. Through the windshield, black shapes appeared against the clouds. Extractor ships, sleek, metallic, silent. Their engines glowed crimson as they spread out in a circle around the canyon. There was no escape now. Lyra touched his hand, her eyes glowing softly. Evan, no run, she whispered. They follow me, not you. He shook his head. Not leaving you, Lyra. Don't even think it. The ships opened fire, beams slicing through the air. The pod shuddered violently, alarms screaming. Evan pulled up hard, dodging one beam, then another. But they were too many. A blast hit the right thruster, and the pod spun out of control, crashing deep into the canyon floor. Silence followed, then pain. Evan groaned, dragging himself from the wreckage, his vision spinning. Lyra, he called weakly. She lay a few feet away, surrounded by faint blue light, her mark blazing like fire beneath her skin. He crawled to her side, gripping her hand. Lyra, please, he whispered. We can't stop here. Her eyes fluttered open, filled with tears. Evan, I see them, she murmured. My people in the light. Before he could answer, the air vibrated again. The extractor ships had landed. Dark armored figures stepped out, their helmets gleaming under the pale sun. One of them spoke through a metallic voice. The carrier of the memory must be surrendered. Evan stood in front of Lyra, rifle raised. You want her, you go through me. The soldier didn't pause. Your kind is irrelevant. They raised their weapons, red lights locking onto him. Evan's grip tightened, his voice steady. Maybe to you, but not to her. A beam fired, but before it hit, Lyra screamed. Her glow exploded into pure white light, bright enough to blind the canyon. The air rippled like liquid, and the ground shook violently. Evan fell back, shielding his eyes. When the light faded, the extractors were gone, melted into shadows, their ships crumbling like dust. Lyra floated slightly above the ground, her hair flowing as if caught in a cosmic wind. Her eyes glowed brighter than the sun. Mother's memory, awake, she whispered, her voice echoing like 1,000 voices at once. Images filled the air, oceans, forests, stars, cities of glass. The lost world of her people, alive again through her. Evan stared in awe, his heart pounding. You're bringing it back, he said softly. She nodded, tears streaming down her glowing face. Memory lives, but it needs anchor. Human heart strong enough to hold. He frowned. Anchor? She reached out, touching his chest. You will carry it with me. A surge of warmth flooded through him. Visions, sounds, colors of galaxies long gone. He gasped as energy flowed between them, connecting them in a single pulse of light. When it ended, she was fading, her glow softening. Lyra, he said, his voice trembling. Don't go. She smiled. Not gone. Inside you now, part of your world. Her form shimmered, dissolving into motes of light that swirled around him like fireflies. He reached out helplessly, his voice breaking. Lyra. But the lights rose, merging into the sky above, forming a single bright star over the canyon. He stood there for a long time, staring at it. The wind carried her voice one last time, soft, distant, but clear. Protect what you feel. Days later, satellites recorded something impossible. A green light spreading across the wastelands. Plants growing where nothing had lived for decades. Rain falling from clear skies. And one man walking alone beneath the stars, carrying a faint silver glow in his eyes. Evan didn't understand what he had become, but he knew what Lyra had left behind. Not power, not technology, but a memory of compassion. A reminder that sometimes, the greatest weapon humanity has is its heart.